Hi, I'm Marla. And the night my sister became CEO, she raised her glass and said, "Someone had to play the failure." My parents laughed, applauded, then looked right at me and said, "She's just trash." Everyone smiled, like it was normal. But then, something happened. Her boss stepped up. He took the mic, and with just a few quiet words, the room went dead silent. Why would a man with nothing to gain defend someone like me? And what happened next wasn't just revenge, it changed everything. Before we begin, tell me, have you ever been treated like a mistake by your own family? Drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. Now, let me take you back to the night it all began. The Chicago skyline sparkled like ice as I drove down Lakeshore Drive, the cold pressing against the windshield like a silent warning. I could see my breath fogging the glass, even with the heat cranked up. The lights of downtown shimmered ahead, sharp, distant, and untouchable. Just like my family. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting on my purse, fingers brushing over the corner of an old note tucked inside. The edges had curled over time. "Kindness is not weakness," it read, in my grandmother's familiar cursive. That card had lived in every bag I carried for the past 20 years. It was the only part of home I ever really took with me. Mom's text had been blunt. "You're expected to attend Celeste's event. No excuses." No, "Hi." No, "How are you?" Just a mandate, as if I were some intern being summoned to a meeting. That's what tonight was, an obligatory appearance, not a reunion. I pulled into the valet lane of the Roosevelt Grand Hotel and handed my keys to a kid who barely looked old enough to drive. The doorman opened the glass doors with the kind of smile that's trained into place, and I stepped inside. The lobby was grand. Marble floors, glass chandeliers, and a scent that tried too hard to be expensive. People milled around in designer suits and gowns, carrying cocktails and ambition. I checked my coat, pressed down the static in my hair, and took the elevator to the rooftop ballroom. The doors opened to a room bursting with gold and champagne. String lights glimmered along the ceiling, and a jazz trio played near the far wall. At the center of it all was Celeste, polished, radiant, magnetic as always. Her new title, CEO of Ilaria, was projected in cursive on a wall behind her. No one noticed when I arrived. I was barely a breeze in the storm of corporate handshakes and backpats. I scanned the room, looking for my seat, and there it was, back table, near the exit, wedged between a service door and a tray of empty glasses. My name card was perched next to a stack of napkins, like an afterthought. I forced a smile, walked toward the table and sat down, adjusting the hem of my dress. I could see my parents near the front. Center table, glowing under the OSR spotlight. They laughed with the VP of something, holding their flutes like royalty. My mother's red dress shimmered. My father's cufflinks caught the light. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd seen either of them in person. Not once did they turn around. I sipped water from a paper cup while the waitstaff bustled around me. One of them, a young girl with tired eyes, gave me an apologetic glance before scooting past. I gave her a polite nod. I knew that look well. Pity dipped in confusion. "It's easier to be invisible when you're used to it," I told myself, tracing the rim of the cup. The MC clinked his glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may, tonight, we celebrate a remarkable woman." Cue the applause. Celeste stepped up to the microphone like she was walking onto a movie set. She wore white. Of course she did. That shade only worked on people who had nothing to hide. Her voice rang out, smooth and confident. "It's not every day a woman becomes CEO before 40, especially in this industry. But let's be honest, I didn't get here alone." A pause, then a smirk. Someone had to play the failure, right? Laughter broke out across the room. Polite, some genuine, most nervous. My mother giggled, my father clapped, and I sat perfectly still. My stomach twisted, but I didn't flinch. I looked down at my plate, empty. Just like always. At least she's honest, my father muttered to someone beside him, not realizing his voice carried across the room. I didn't drink the champagne in front of me, just stared at it. Tiny bubbles rising, trying to escape. I smiled, the kind you give strangers on the train, the kind that says, "I'm fine, I swear." But inside, my chest burned. Not from surprise. Humiliation isn't new when it comes from your own blood. It just gets louder when there's a microphone involved. Images from childhood flickered in my mind like film reels out of order. Celeste winning the spelling bee while I clapped from the third row. Celeste's college acceptance while I cleaned up dinner. Celeste's voice always louder, always certain. And me, the helper, the peacemaker, the extra. The MC wrapped up, and Celeste stepped back, basking in her applause. She blew a kiss toward our parents. They looked like they might cry from pride. That's when he walked in. Merritt. He didn't enter with fanfare, no announcement, no spotlight. Just a quiet presence in a room too loud to notice. He moved toward the stage, calm and deliberate, with the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Celeste lit up when she saw him. Her face softened, her posture straightened. She mouthed something to him, probably "thank you" or "your turn." She had no idea. But I saw it. Right before he stepped up to the microphone, Merritt's eyes flicked to me. Just for a second. His expression didn't change much, just a slight pull at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, not quite, a frown, but something knowing. My fingers tightened around the purse in my lap. I felt the card again. Kindness is not weakness. Suddenly the room felt too warm. Merritt adjusted the mic. No notes, no smile. The crowd waited, and then, the silence wasn't immediate, but it was sharp. The laughter thinned like a tide pulling back, and all that remained was the faint echo of clinking glasses and a jazz chord that hung awkwardly in the air before fading out. You could feel the shift. Not everyone noticed it right away, but I did. I felt it in my teeth. Merritt stood at the center of the room, hands calm, posture straight, his eyes scanning the crowd, not smiling, not performative, just there, present, measured. Celeste, seated below him, tilted her chin and gave a smile I'd seen 100 times before, the one she practiced in mirrors, the kind that said, "I've already won." He cleared his throat, not because he needed to, but because he was waiting for something to settle or unsettle. "Tonight," he began, voice firm but not loud, "we celebrate leadership." That word hung. Not just the titles we carry, but the weight behind them. No applause, not yet. People shifted in their seats. Celeste crossed one leg over the other and clasped her hands, her smile holding steady. Merritt's eyes didn't land on her, though. They drifted, past the rows of executives and proud parents, past the smiling board members, to the back, to me. For one moment, maybe two, his gaze locked onto mine. No smirk, no condescension, just a pause, like he was waiting for me to breathe again. And suddenly, I was aware of everything. The napkin in my lap, the card in my purse, the uneven beat of my heart in my chest. He continued, "Real leadership doesn't always stand in front of the camera. It doesn't always walk center stage. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it goes unnoticed, on purpose." Celeste let out a soft laugh. I saw her lean toward our mother and whisper, "He loves his metaphors, doesn't he?" I looked down, then back at him. Was that line about me? Was I imagining it? No one else seemed to catch it, but my body reacted like it knew something my mind hadn't caught up with yet. My hands started to tremble, just slightly. I placed them under the table. He was still speaking, but I wasn't absorbing it all. Something in my brain had gone into rewind. 2 years ago, the project. It was a company-wide initiative, something progressive, something ahead of its time. I had drafted the blueprint, outlined the outreach, mapped the data flow. Celeste was just supposed to oversee and report. I was never meant to stay in that office for long. I had Rowan to raise. A life outside the building. Then came the push. "You should step back," my mother had said. "Let Celeste shine. It'll help all of us." Celeste hadn't objected, not once. And by the time I turned in my resignation, the project was already labeled hers. The press picked it up. The company praised her vision, her innate sense of people. They gave her 3 promotions in 18 months. And me? I went back to tutoring algebra and folding laundry between Zoom calls. Merritt had read that project. I remembered giving it to him in person. We had talked for 20 minutes in the break room. He'd called it quietly brilliant. He knew. Back in the present, I looked up. Merritt raised his glass toward Celeste, smiling just enough to be polite. The cameras flashed. She stood and raised hers in return. Then Merritt turned, ever so slightly, and lifted his glass again, this time toward me. He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. It was subtle. Too subtle for most to notice. But not me. And not Celeste. Her smile didn't falter right away, but something in her eyes shifted, tightened. Judith, sitting beside her, leaned in with a confused expression. "Do you know that girl in the back?" I imagined her asking. I gave Merritt the smallest nod I could manage, just enough to acknowledge what had happened without drawing attention. My skin was warm, but my fingertips were cold. Someone saw me, not as a punchline, not as the helper, not as the burden who stepped aside. He saw me. I needed air. I stood quietly, slipping past the catering staff and out onto the balcony. The door clicked behind me. The night air hit my cheeks like a slap, sharp, cleansing. The city stretched beneath the rooftop like a living thing. Lights blinked from cars, from offices, from apartments filled with people living entire lives I'd never know. I leaned on the railing and let my shoulders drop for the first time all evening. He didn't expose her. He could have. He had the stage, the mic, the ears of everyone who mattered. But he didn't. He just reminded her, reminded all of them, that truth doesn't disappear just because it's quiet. I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial. It rang twice. "Mom?" Rowan's voice came through, groggy but curious. "Yeah, honey. I'm okay. I think I just remembered who I used to be." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you crying?" "No, just cold," I said. "Go back to sleep." Before I hung up, I pulled the card from my purse and held it under the balcony light. "Kindness is not weakness." The ink was fading, but the words held steady. I stayed outside a few more minutes, breathing in the cold until my heart rate evened out. Then I went back in. The laughter had resumed. The glasses were full again. Celeste spotted me the second I stepped back inside. Her glass rose. A forced smile stretched across her face like a mask too tight at the edges. I raised mine, too. We held each other's gaze across the room. This time, I didn't look away. Merritt was off to the side now, talking with someone, but his eyes flicked toward me once more. Not long, just enough. There wasn't applause. There wasn't a grand moment. But I didn't need one. Sometimes the biggest shift happens in silence. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of what she said, but because of what he didn't. I lay there, eyes open, heart ticking slow and sharp, like a metronome that wouldn't shut off. The ceiling fan spun above me, carving the dark into slivers, over and over. By morning, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than the noise from the party had. The sun slipped through the blinds, but it didn't warm the room. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I forgot to drink. Cold, bitter, just like the air between me and the people who still claimed to love me. The news hummed from the corner of the room, and there she was, Celeste, all smiles and pearls, featured on a segment about Chicago's rising female executives. I didn't even realize I'd stood up until I heard the remote hit the counter. The screen went black. I sat back down, still, empty, but not broken. I opened my laptop without thinking. Routine, muscle memory. A few work emails from the tutoring platform, some spam. One notice about a scheduled system maintenance, nothing urgent. And then I saw it, subject line. About that night, merit. For a second, I thought it had to be spam, a prank, or maybe Celeste playing some twisted game. But it wasn't. I clicked it open, heart thudding like a warning in my chest. Marla, there are things you should know. The initiative Celeste claims credit for, the one that launched her trajectory, that was your work. I still have the original files with your name on them. I never deleted anything. I didn't speak up then because it wasn't my place. But now, if you want to set the record straight, I'll help, but only if you're ready. M. I read it 3 times, maybe more. Then I pushed away from the table and stood. My legs were shaky, like I'd just stood up too fast, like the truth hit my bloodstream before I could brace myself. He knew. All this time, he knew. I paced the living room, my thoughts a war zone. What good would it do? She'll find a way to twist it again. She always does. You'll look bitter, petty, desperate. But then came another voice, quieter, steadier. You've swallowed so much you forgot what your voice sounds like. Silence isn't peace. It's surrender with a prettier name. I leaned against the window and closed my eyes. My mother's words echoed, not for the first time. You're the peacekeeper, Marla. Don't ruin things for everyone. That's what they'd always told me. Don't rock the boat. Don't air dirty laundry. Smile when you're bleeding. Apologize even when it's not your fault. I was trained to fold myself small enough to disappear. But now someone had seen me. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. I checked the caller ID. Mom. Of course. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Marla, we need to talk. Her tone already had the weight of judgment. Celeste told us you left the party early. She said you made a scene. My fingers tightened around the phone. I left quietly, I said. You know how sensitive you are. Don't make her big night about you. There it was, the rewrite, the shifting of blame, the familiar family dance, where I was always the fragile one, the too emotional one, the liability. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stopped. I pressed the red button mid-sentence, and it felt better than I expected. I stood still for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand. Then I walked back to the kitchen, sat down, and opened Merritt's email again. This time, I clicked on the attachment. It opened in seconds. The proposal, the pitch deck, the outline, my formatting, my name right at the top, time-stamped, documented, untouched. I scrolled through page after page, each one louder than any defense I'd ever given. They told me I was useless, I said aloud, but every number here proves otherwise. I stared at the reply button, then I clicked it, typed 2 words, I'm ready, and hit send. Right then, Rowan stepped into the kitchen in his pajama pants, rubbing his eyes. You're up early, he mumbled, pulling juice from the fridge. I looked at him, and he paused. You look different, Mom. I smiled, not wide, but deep. Maybe I just remembered what strong feels like. The TV came back on in the background. Same segment, same applause for Celeste, but this time I didn't mute it. I let it play. I listened. I watched. Not with pain, but with clarity. She'd built a throne on my silence. But I wasn't silent anymore. And that shift, small as it was, changed how the morning light felt when it hit my skin. By the time I walked into Merritt's office, the sun had just cleared the buildings across the street. His office, all glass and clean lines, caught it perfectly. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that reminded you not everything loud makes a sound. I sat down across from him, my hands folded in my lap, palms sweating slightly. My best suit, not expensive but tailored just enough, hugged my frame like armor. A soft navy blue chosen on purpose. Power but not aggression. The glass behind him reflected my image faintly. I didn't look younger, but I looked steadier, like someone who'd been through something and finally decided to stop pretending otherwise. He didn't waste time. "I meant what I said in the email," he said, sliding a folder across the desk between us. "These are your files. System logs confirm you authored them. I've kept backups since the beginning." I opened the folder slowly, like it might burn. There it was. Project Genesis, Initial Proposal, Marla Jensen, page after page. My formatting, my voice in the language, my notes in the margins, those slanted little arrows I used to mark adjustments, a sketch of the rollout plan, even a coffee stain from the night I stayed up too late finalizing it. I hadn't seen this version in years. Celeste had repackaged it so well I almost believed she wrote it. But this was mine, unedited, undeniable. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. Merritt leaned back. "Look, I need to be honest with you. If this comes out, her board will try to spin it. They'll reframe the narrative as collaboration, and they'll paint you as bitter," I finished for him. He nodded. "Exactly." I looked down at the folder, then back at him. "So, silence wins again?" He didn't answer right away. He just studied me, like he wasn't sure which version of me he was speaking to yet. "No," he said finally, "but timing does." I understood what he meant. He wasn't offering pity. He wasn't trying to fight my battles. What he was offering was space. Space to plan. Not a savior, just someone who'd stopped standing in my way. I nodded once. That moment was interrupted by the soft buzz of my phone. Voicemail. I glanced at the screen. Judith. I pressed play, keeping the volume low. "Honey," her voice said, sweet and sharp as lemon. "Celeste told us Merritt might have misunderstood some things. He's been under pressure, you know. Don't make this worse. Just let it go." It wasn't rage that built inside me. Not this time. It was recognition, that tone, that carefully wrapped poison. Concern as a disguise for control. I deleted the voicemail, not out of anger, out of clarity. For the first time, I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I looked back at the folder, my handwriting, my name. Suddenly, a memory came in hard and fast. College, business fair. I had worked for weeks on a brand identity pitch, color schemes, taglines, target markets. I'd stayed up till 3 a.m. polishing that thing. Celeste had stepped in the day of and said she'd help me present it. What happened was, she stood up and presented it like it was hers. Didn't blink, didn't even glance at me. Afterward, our parents clapped like she'd just solved world hunger. Later that night, when I confronted her, she smiled and said, "It's not stealing, Marla. It's teamwork. We're family." And I'd let it go. One more time, I'd swallowed the truth to keep the peace. Back in Merritt's office, I closed the folder gently and met his eyes. "If I pursue legal acknowledgement," I asked, "how long before it becomes a circus?" He shrugged. "Weeks? Maybe less." "Not yet," I said. He looked surprised. "Then what?" I held the folder tightly. "We start smaller, quietly. The right people, the right ears." He gave me a half smile. "You mean the ones who still think Celeste invented this from scratch?" I returned it. "Exactly. Let's make them curious." He nodded. All right, I'll coordinate some meetings. No headlines yet. As I stood, something settled in me. Not anger, not revenge, strategy. By the time I stepped into the elevator, my thoughts were already 3 steps ahead. My reflections stared back from every panel, 12 versions of me in polished chrome. None of them looked small anymore. I reached into my purse, fingers brushing the card again. Kindness is not weakness. No, it wasn't. But they were about to learn what it looked like when it stopped being quiet. And it started with a subject line. That morning, I sat at my desk. The same one where I'd written the first draft of Project Genesis all those years ago. Same laptop, same chipped corner on the keyboard. Only now the woman behind the screen wasn't the same. I reread the email again, even though it didn't need editing. Subject: clarification of original documentation. Project Genesis Direct. Professional, no venom. Just facts lined up like clean rows of tiles. Attached was a PDF copy of my original proposal, time-stamped, signed, archived. It wasn't a war cry, it was a receipt. I hit send. There were no drums, no sirens, just the soft whoosh of digital finality. I closed the lid and sat back in my chair, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. By mid-morning, Merritt called. "You did it?" "Yes," I replied, standing by the window. No fireworks, no chaos, just truth in black and white. He paused, then said, "That's how real damage starts, quietly." I could hear the approval tucked behind his neutral tone. Not celebration, not sympathy, just respect. It was enough. The rest of the morning passed slowly. I tried to clean the kitchen, but my hands kept going still. Tried to read a magazine, but the words floated off the page. My body felt calm, but something inside me was pacing. Then my phone rang. Celeste. I let it buzz twice before answering. "What the hell did you send to my board?" she demanded, skipping any pretense of greeting. "Facts," I said, my voice steady. "God, you are unbelievable. You're jealous. You always have been. You couldn't stand that I finally made something of myself." I didn't flinch. "You've been someone your whole life, Celeste, even when it wasn't earned." Silence. Not the kind that comes from confusion, but the kind that falls when someone realizes you've stopped playing by their rules. She hung up, or maybe I did. Either way, the line went dead. Afterward, I sank to the floor in the hallway. The hardwood felt cold under my legs. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. Everything was uncoiling. Years of being polite, being quiet, being small. But doubt crept in. What if they twist it again? What if I've just handed her another chance to rewrite the story, only now with more drama? My mother's old words echoed, as they always did when I felt uncertain. Peace is better than pride. And for years I believed her. Believed that staying silent was love, that disappearing was noble, that letting others shine was humility. But not today. Not when peace means pretending I don't exist, I whispered. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. An email from Merritt. He'd forwarded a reply from one of the board members. I reviewed the archived data. The timestamps confirm Ms. Jensen's authorship. Please ensure internal communications remain discreet. No congratulations, no apology, just truth on record. Merritt added a single line beneath it. "You've been seen." 3 words, but they held more weight than 100 apologies. That night, Rowan helped me in the kitchen, peeling carrots like he was defusing a bomb. "Are you and Aunt Celeste fighting?" he asked suddenly. I looked up from the cutting board. "Not fighting," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Just remembering who we are." He nodded like that made sense, even if it didn't fully. There was a quiet understanding in the way he handed me the bowl, like he could feel something shifting too, even if he didn't know the details. After dinner, I curled up in bed with my journal. The card from Grandma was still tucked between its pages. I pulled it out again, those same words staring back. Kindness is not weakness. But tonight, I finally wrote something underneath it. It's strategy. I closed the book gently, switched off the lamp, and lay still. Outside, the city hummed like it always did, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel like it was drowning me out. It felt like I had joined the noise, on purpose, and the world wasted no time in answering back. The next morning, a knock broke the quiet rhythm of my coffee spoon. It wasn't the usual mail carrier. This man wore a dark blazer and carried authority in a manila envelope. He asked my name, had me sign a digital pad, then left without a word. The envelope sat on my kitchen table for a minute before I opened it. I already knew it wasn't good. Inside, a legal notice from a firm I recognized, Celeste's corporate attorneys. Cease and desist. The words blurred as I read them, once, then again. They accused me of defamation, professional sabotage, and malicious interference. I almost laughed at the phrasing. Too polished, too expensive, the kind of words that dress up fear. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the papers back into the envelope, but my face didn't move. Not a flicker. I'd been knocked down by worse. I picked up my phone and called Merritt. He answered before the first ring ended. I warned you she'd go for the legal play first. I didn't think she'd stoop this low, I said, pacing by the window. She's scared, he said simply. Only scared people use paper as weapons. That line stuck with me. I looked out at the skyline, the same one I'd watched the night of her celebration. It looked different now, sharper, colder, like a reflection of the people who'd taught me that silence was safer than truth. Merritt's voice brought me back. Let me handle this internally. You don't need to get tangled in her mess. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. No, I'll handle my own name this time. He didn't argue, just a quiet pause before, then make it count. I hung up and leaned against the counter, the phone still warm in my hand. And just like that, memory found me again. A memory I'd buried under too many let-it-go conversations. The day Celeste got her first big promotion. We'd been in Mom and Dad's backyard. She hugged me, told me she'd make things right someday, that she hadn't forgotten whose work she'd used to impress her old boss. I wanted to believe her. I really did. That apology never came. Instead, she turned it into a joke at her CEO party. The same lines our parents had clapped for. She's just sensitive, they'd said. Let her have her moment. Her moment never ended. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, not with a call, but with headlines. Disgruntled former employee challenges CEO's legacy. There it was, my name, my face, attached to a story spun from thin air, a hit piece from a local business blog. The photo they used was years old, one where I looked unsure, blinking into a flash I wasn't ready for. The comments were worse. Classic bitter ex-employee. She's just looking for attention. Jealousy looks ugly on older women. Strangers. Dissecting my worth as if it were a sport. My stomach turned, but I didn't cry. I scrolled until the screen blurred, then set the phone down. The silence that followed was louder than the noise itself. Then came the inevitable. Judith. My mother's voice came through the line, syrupy and tight. Honey, what are you doing to your sister? She's crying on TV. She says you're ruining her career. I took a deep breath. She's lying, Mom. Marla, stop this. It's embarrassing the family. The word family hit like a bruise being pressed. I didn't answer. The silence stretched long enough for her to fill it. You always did make things harder than they had to be. Click. The call ended. For a moment, I stood there, staring at my reflection in the window. Just me, the apartment, and the city that didn't care about family politics. It was strange, realizing that love could sound so much like dismissal. I sat down on the couch. The apartment dimmed as the afternoon sun slid behind the buildings. My phone kept lighting up with notifications. The same headline, the same comments, the same lies echoing louder every hour. I could have fallen apart right there. Instead, I let the silence settle, heavy and complete. Then a new message blinked onto the screen. Merritt again. She overplayed her hand. The board just called an emergency meeting. They want you to attend. I read it twice, my thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, I said it out loud. Not to him, not even to myself, but to the air. She started this in public, I whispered. That's where it'll end. The clock read 8:47 p.m. I stood, walked to the closet, and pulled out the gray blazer, the same one I'd worn to her CEO celebration. I ran my hands over the fabric, smoothing invisible wrinkles like a ritual before battle. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the same woman, but she was no longer waiting for anyone to speak for her. The quiet had turned into something sharper, purpose, not fear. Before leaving, I picked up my grandmother's card from the dresser. The paper had softened with time. The ink faded slightly. I traced the words with my finger. Kindness is not weakness. This time, I didn't whisper it. I said it clearly, firmly, a vow, not a reminder. Then I grabbed my purse and keys. The hallway outside smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. My footsteps echoed, calm and measured. By the time I reached the elevator, I already knew what I'd say when the cameras asked their questions. Not a performance, not a defense, just truth, clean, quiet, undeniable. The elevator doors opened, and my reflection stared back at me once more, steady, composed, unafraid. I stepped out and walked the hallway like I'd done 1,000 times before. But everything felt different now. I wasn't just here to defend myself. I was here to put an end to the story others had written for me. The hallway buzzed with low murmurs. Then the glass doors to the boardroom came into view. I saw them, men and women seated around the long table, suits and silence, waiting for something to shift. Celeste stood at the far end, flawless in her navy blazer, her smile razor-sharp for the press beyond the windows. The moment I stepped in, the room stilled. Whispers vanished like smoke. "You shouldn't be here," Celeste said, her voice low and honeyed. "You shouldn't have lied," I replied, just as calm. The board chair, a silver-haired man with tired eyes, cleared his throat. "Let's hear both sides." No one moved. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room on me. Cameras blinked red outside the glass wall, waiting. Merritt rose from his seat, opened his laptop, and with a few keystrokes, projected the file onto the screen behind him. Project Genesis. Original draft M. Jensen metadata. Submission timestamps, unedited records. The sound of a few gasps broke the hush. Celeste stepped forward, voice clipped. "That's impossible. She's manipulating old drafts." Merritt didn't even glance at her. "The system locks edits after submission. Timestamps are automatic. There's no manipulation." Silence followed, heavy, hanging. I took a breath and stood straighter. "I didn't come here for revenge," I said, slowly. "I came for truth. And for my son to see what dignity looks like when it stands alone." The words hung in the air, unshaken. And suddenly, I wasn't nervous. I was steady. Celeste's PR manager leaned in to whisper something to her. She waved him off, then snapped loud enough for the room to hear. "No, she's nothing. She's a failure. She's always been—" Click, flash. Cameras outside the glass caught every word. Every sneer. The board members shifted, discomfort radiating from their stares. One stood, quietly gathered her notepad, and left the room without a word. Another followed. Celeste stood frozen, her hands clenched. Her image, so tightly polished for so long, had cracked. The board chair turned toward me. "You'll receive formal acknowledgement in our report. Official authorship on record." I didn't smile. I nodded once. It wasn't a full apology, but it was truth, in print, in the room. That was enough. Merritt met my gaze across the table. No pity. Just a quiet pride in his expression. Like a silent nod that said, "You did this." Celeste muttered from the corner, her voice small now. "You think this changes anything?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, but it ends the silence." She turned away. I walked out alone. Outside, the sky had softened into gray. Snow had started to fall. Soft, sparse flakes that melted before they touched the ground. I paused under the overhang, letting the cold brush my cheeks. "It's over," I said aloud, but even as the words left me, I knew better. Things like this don't just end. Family scars don't heal because a room clapped. They linger. They sting again when no one's watching. That night, after dinner and homework and packing Rowan's lunch for the next day, I sat with my laptop in bed. The city lights blinked beyond my window. My inbox had filled with noise, headlines, threads, opinions from people who had never known me but now felt entitled to dissect me. Then one new message stood out, from a board member I barely remembered. Subject, composure. "You handled yourself with remarkable poise today. It's rare to see integrity win without shouting." I read it twice, smiled. Not the kind of smile for others, but the kind you keep for yourself. Quiet, full of something deeper than relief. Something like peace. I closed my laptop, set it aside, and turned out the light. The city kept humming. But inside me, something had finally gone still. Not empty, but whole. I woke up the next morning with that same quiet inside me. Not cold, just resolved. The noise hadn't vanished, but it didn't seep in anymore. My phone buzzed constantly that morning. News alerts, notifications, headlines trickling in one after another. CEO under fire for misattributed work. Internal sources confirm document ownership dispute. Legacy questioned, Jensen's fall from grace? My name didn't appear in any of them, but anyone who had ever worked at that company, anyone who knew the real story, they'd read between the lines. A few messages rolled in from former colleagues. "You were always the brain behind it. Is it true? You okay?" I didn't respond. I didn't feel the need to. The point had never been about applause. It was about putting the truth where it belonged. Quietly. Permanently. Later that afternoon, I met Merritt at a little cafe tucked off a side street, the kind of place that didn't care who you were or what you'd been through, just whether you wanted your coffee black or with cream. He was already at a table when I arrived. No laptop today. Just a ceramic mug in his hand and a weariness that looked a little like relief. "She's taking a leave," he said without greeting. "Voluntary?" He shrugged. "Officially, yes. But between us, it was either that or get pushed. The board's planning a full rebrand in the next quarter." I stirred the sugar into my tea slowly. "She's stepping down. Quietly," I said. Merritt looked up, met my eyes. "That's her punishment. Silence." We both sat there for a moment, letting it land. "You didn't win because she lost, Marla," he added. "You won because you stopped letting them tell you who you were." That stayed with me longer than the tea did. That evening, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I saw the news," she said. "Celeste, she's not doing well." I let the silence stretch, long enough to make a point. "Neither was I, Mom, for years." There was a pause, no defense, no immediate redirect, just quiet on the line. I didn't raise you girls to hate each other, she finally said. No, I replied, steady. You raised one to shine, and one to make sure she always looked good doing it. I wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. Instead, she whispered, barely audible, "You always were the strong one." I didn't know what to say back, and for once, that felt okay. The next day, I was back at the cafe. Same spot, same corner table. The TV above the bar was muted, but I caught the headline on the screen. Celeste Jensen resigns amid internal investigation. The footage showed her walking briskly past a cluster of reporters. Big sunglasses, lips pressed into a firm line. No statement, no hand to wave, no smile. I watched in silence, not triumph, not glee. Just a sort of settled stillness. May she find peace, I whispered, even if it's far from me. That night, Rowan padded into my room with a few sheets of paper in his hand. "Hey, Mom," he said, "I had to write something for class, about someone brave." He handed me the pages, then curled up at the foot of my bed, waiting for me to read. It was titled, "The Bravest Person I Know." He wrote about me, not because I yelled or fought or won something, but because I stayed, because I waited, because I stood up, even when it was hard, even when no one was clapping. "She doesn't fight with fists," he wrote. "She fights with patience. She stands when it's her turn. That's what brave looks like." I didn't say anything. I just reached for him, pulled him close, and let the tears fall. But not from hurt this time, from healing. Later that night, I stood on the balcony just before bed. The city stretched out below me, lights flickering like quiet reminders of life continuing. Wind brushed my face gently. I took out the old card from my nightstand, the one with my grandmother's handwriting. Kindness is not weakness. I laid it gently on the balcony railing. The wind caught the edge, lifted it slightly, then let it settle back down. Steady, still. And somewhere inside me, I found the words I'd never had the courage to believe. For years, I thought silence meant surrender. Now I know, sometimes it's just strength waiting for the right moment to speak. That thought stayed with me like a soft hum in the back of my mind. It didn't fade the next day or the one after. It was like a thread, steady, quiet, pulling me towards something I couldn't quite name yet. A few mornings later, while I was clearing breakfast dishes, my laptop pinged. I almost ignored it. Old habits die slow. But the subject line stopped me. Invitation, Women's Entrepreneurship Event. From Silence to Strength. For a second, I just stared at it. My name was printed in bold at the top. "We'd love for you to share your story," the organizer had written. My story, not Celeste's version, not a soundbite, mine. I closed the laptop without answering. My hands were trembling just enough to spill my coffee. I wasn't sure if I was afraid or grateful, maybe both. It took me 3 days to respond. When I finally did, it was simple. Yes, I'll be there. The night before the event, I ironed a navy dress I hadn't worn since before everything unraveled. It wasn't fancy, but it fit the woman I'd become, grounded, certain, quiet without being small. The next morning, I stood behind the curtain, waiting for my turn. The host's voice echoed faintly from the stage. Our next speaker reminds us that power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. When I walked out, the lights hit me, warm and blinding. For a heartbeat, I thought I might lose my breath. Then I found Merritt's face in the crowd, sitting in the back, calm, watching. And suddenly, I was steady again. I gripped the podium. "For a long time," I began, "I believed being kind meant staying quiet. That dignity meant swallowing truth for the sake of keeping peace." I paused, let the words settle. But I learned that kindness can also mean telling the truth, even when it shakes the room. No one spoke, just that charged stillness, the kind where people aren't waiting for what's next, they're feeling what's already been said. Then came soft applause, slow and real. No noise, no spectacle. Just understanding. Afterward, I mingled for a while, shaking hands, smiling when it felt right. I was gathering my things when a volunteer approached me. "Someone left this for you," she said, handing me a small white envelope. There was no return name, only Marla written in a shaky, familiar script. I opened it slowly. Inside, a folded note. "Marla, I'm sorry for all the years I clapped for the wrong things. Mom." I read it twice, then again. The words didn't sting. They didn't even surprise me. They just settled. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my bag. No tears. Just one long, quiet exhale, like air leaving a room that had been sealed too long. That evening, I sat on the couch scrolling through headlines. Buried between local features was a short article. Former CEO Celeste Jensen begins mental health sabbatical. The photo showed her walking alone down a quiet street, no cameras, no entourage. For the first time, she looked fragile, not broken, but human. I didn't click the link. I didn't save it. I just whispered, maybe this is how we both start over, separately. Later that night, Rowan was sprawled across the living room floor, drawing spaceships and superheroes. He looked up and grinned. "Mom, are you gonna be famous now?" I laughed. "No, sweetheart. I'm just finally me." He smiled wide. "That's better than famous." We both laughed then, easy, light, like the sound of something finally unclenching. When he went to bed, I lingered in the quiet for a while. The apartment hummed softly, the city outside alive but distant. On my desk sat the old card, the one I'd carried through all of it. Kindness is not weakness. I lifted it from the drawer, smoothed its edges, and placed it in a small frame. Beneath it, I added a yellow sticky note with my own handwriting. Silence is not surrender. It's strength waiting for the right voice. The frame caught the last bit of evening light, glowing faintly on the desk. I turned off the lamp, letting the reflection fade into darkness. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like I was reclaiming something lost. I felt like I'd built something new. I didn't need applause anymore. I just needed to know that when someone said my name, it was mine.